I am just absolutely privileged to be here today with one of my best friends, Bruce Rumpf. Bruce owns USA One Jobs today, and has grown a very small business into a multi-state business. And he is somebody who I hold in the highest of high regard. And he has really helped downtown Toledo develop into where it's at today. He and a group of his friends.
Well, thank you, Ray, but we're going to talk about you.
Ah, well.
Okay? No, I know you don't like to, but that's what we're going to do today. Take us back, because I found out something new today, which is always interesting with you. I always discovered new things. Where were you born?
I was born in Knoxville, Tennessee, actually, but I'm from Friendsville, Tennessee, a little Quaker town that was part of the Underground Railway, and it's known for that. Cujo Cave and the Quakers still have their school there. My stepbrother, who I've never considered a stepbrother, he's my brother, Albert Bell, went to that school, Friendsville Academy, and it's a place that was very, very special and still is in my heart. My grandmother, paternal and maternal grandmothers and grandparents lived there. And we lived in a little tar paper shack. Dad came back from World War II, and Dad had PTSD, but it was not recognized back then.
I think they kind of refer to it as shell shock, which sounded like it would go away.
They did. And Patton, made it really embarrassing for people to admit they had that back then.
Okay.
And, Dad was over there for 4 years flying the hump over the Himalayas, and he saw atrocities that none of us can ever imagine. And even at a young age, me and my brother knew that.
But my guess is he didn't talk about it.
He did not.
Yeah.
No.
Same situation with my father. He was in the Pacific, and unless he, one night we would tie one on, just the two of us.
Yep.
At that point, it would start to come out, but it really had to be, he almost had to be anesthetized in order to talk about it. Speaking of Tennessee, I believe we're both Tennessee squires.
We are. I've got my 4 inches of Tennessee squire property, and they call me a month ago.
We're property owners, doesn't matter how much.
We're property owners, yeah.
And that's thanks to the bourbon, Jim Beam.
It is.
It can become a Tennessee squire, so we're very few of us around.
It is so much fun.
Yes.
And I write them letters back when they write me, and we just have a good time with it, and I love Tennessee.
So how long were you in Tennessee?
I was in Tennessee on and off for quite some time through my childhood and adulthood, but we left Tennessee when I was about 4 years old.
Okay.
Dad worked on atomic energy projects around the country, Rocky Flats, Savannah River Project.
You talk about early pioneers. They had just ended World War II in the Pacific with atomic and hydrogen bombs, so that was a brand new field.
That's right. And my mother was in the secret women that was at Oak Ridge, Tennessee. There were over 35,000 people that lived at Oak Ridge, and nobody knew about it.
I'll be darned.
Yeah, she was a special lady.
How do you keep that a secret?
Well, you couldn't today.
Right.
With the overflights of the satellites and, way beyond Francis Gary Powers, you couldn't do that today. Yeah. But back then, it was serious. Loose lips did sink ships. Yeah. And
there's a gal in Toledo that works for Highland, Jessica Clark, and she's born in Beijing. And her parents, who took bicycles to work back then, they never knew where they worked their whole career. And they worked at a nuclear facility, but no one was allowed to talk about it. And so the kids never knew until almost moving to America what their parents actually did.
My dad had Q clearance through the government, and especially when he worked at Savannah River Project. And he wasn't able to go out of the United States without letting the government know. He wasn't able to go into Canada even, and certainly not Mexico or anything internationally abroad, because that was tough clearance to get back then.
Yeah.
It was
you
high
mentioned
security.
The Underground Railroad, and I remember once you talking about a school that you attended that
was bombed. It was blew up.
Why?
Yeah. The KKK did not want the school integrated, and so they blew it up. It was in Clinton, Tennessee. And it's odd to think about these things. It's odd to think about somebody that's only 70 years old, thank you very much.
Yes.
And being actually living in a log cabin that their mom and dad built with their own hands.
That was like the next place you went to, is that right?
It was. From the tar paper shack to the log cabin on Tellico Lake, and then into a 19-foot trailer that Dad towed all around the United States with a Buick, 55 Buick Century, and earlier. It's whatever we had to drive.
Did that feel like an adventure, or did it feel like a hardship?
Oh no, it was never a hardship.
Okay.
Our family, never did I feel like I was poor, and we were very poor. When Dad got crippled up on a construction site, Bruce, at Mid-States Elevators, they dropped a mat on Dad. They didn't just drop it once, they dropped it twice. And Dr. Talmadge was going to cut Dad's leg off. And Dad says, "No, Guy," he says, "you're not going to cut my leg off." And he pulled out his service .45. And Guy says, "What are you going to do, Ray, shoot me?" And Dad says, "No, it ain't for you." So, Guy said, "Ray, if you can, any sign, just give me any sign." He said, "I'll make my big toe wiggle." Now his leg's in 100 pieces.
Yeah.
And he made his big toe wiggle, and he held Guy to the promise. And Guy said, "We'll wait till morning, Ray, but you're going to get gangrene and you'll die." He said, "If I die, I die." So, he didn't die.
And how old were you at this point?
11.
11.
Yeah. I started welding in barns when I was 11 years old. My brother helped me. My dad showed me. And we would take old trucks and old cars and paint them with bridge paint. And we would wash and detail cars, and we bought powdered milk and powdered eggs and stuff at Camp Perry, at military auctions.
How long was your dad off work?
7 years.
7 years?
Yeah.
Now, most people would assume that you have workers' compensation and disability.
No.
None.
We had nothing. The only ones that helped us were the union. The union business agents would come to the house every month, and there would be 2 or 3 and sometimes 4. And they would bring a hard hat full of $1 and $2 bills, and maybe a hula hoop or a wiffle ball, and they'd give it to me and my brother. And we thought they were from the church because they kept calling my dad brother.
Okay.
And I said, "Dad," I said, "what church are they from?" And he said, "Son, they're not from the church, they're from the union." So, that raised my awareness, and later on I decided that's what I wanted to do.
And tell me the progression that you took in the union.
When Dad was able to go back to work, he was manager of East Lane Mobile Manor. Okay. You know, that was a small trailer too. That was about 24 feet long and 8 feet wide, and it's still there.
What?
That trailer's still there. Yeah. And so I decided to do what my dad did. I wanted to be a millwright, and I wanted to help people. And they drafted me to run for business agent for the Millwrights Union.
Okay.
And I did, and lo and behold, I won. And then I became Secretary Treasurer of the Northwest Ohio District Council of Carpenters, and we gained 5% membership a year over a number of years, and I became President of Building Trades. Lord knows they had bad taste. And so then eventually the United Brotherhood of Carpenters asked me to go to Washington, D.C., and I headed up, I was 17 unions with the building trades, and 11 of my own. And then went to Washington, D.C., and I had United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico.
All from a hard hat filled with dollar bills.
$1 and $2 bills.
Yeah. Ray, you gave me a little nugget, and as no one probably will realize that this was not rehearsed. We went over no questions or anything. We have that chemistry and always have had it.
Yes.
But you're in Tennessee. The KKK The Underground Railroad. I have to say that of all the people I know, you have the least bigotry or racism in your body, in your mind, in your soul.
I have none.
How in the world can you come from that kind of background? Because assumption would be is that, and being poor,
Yeah.
on top of it, you got to blame somebody
Yeah.
for your plight.
You gotta have money to be racist. Poor people know that you can't be racist. You got to work with everybody.
Yeah.
And so Jazz Cox, who was the biggest black man I'd ever met in Friendsville, Tennessee, he was about 6'8",
Okay.
and he was a descendant of the Underground Railroad participants that came up and went away from the South in slavery. Jazz Cox was my hero, and he was about 6'8" and just as black as coal. And he carried me, this little white butterball baby, around with him day after day, and he would stop at the cabin and say, "Miss Elsie, is it okay if I take Junior with me today?" And Mom would say, "Sure, Jazz."
So that means that your parents, because racism is really a learned trait, don't you think? You don't,
Oh, it is.
You don't just start off saying, "I think I'll be a racist."
No.
You get somebody who says, "This is why. This is how you're going to be. This
That's
is how
right.
you're going to act, and this is how I'm going to compliment you if you do certain things." And so you learn bigotry and you learn
That's
racism.
right. And it
So-
goes on both sides.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No
It
question
goes on
about
both
it. I think
sides,
sometimes people
you know?
forget that, and it's an equal opportunity.
Racism is a word that needs definition today more than ever. You've got young groups of people today that are both black and white, Hispanic, every denomination you can think of, and they think it's okay to do all kinds of silly things, and when somebody calls them on it, they throw racism out. Well, hold on a minute. You know, is it racism to expect somebody to work a day's work for a day's pay? I don't care what color you are.
Right.
It does not matter to me.
Right.
But just because you're white does not mean you're privileged and you don't have to work and you can take on the system.
Right.
Or black, or anything.
Ray, mentioning the union, I have a lot of friends who have no relationship with the unions.
Absolutely.
And they assume that they're always protecting the bad worker. And I usually say, well, I'll tell you what, just a thought. Today you're going to go over 20 bridges. You better pray to God that it was a union iron worker working on that bridge.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I just want them to
You're
just
right.
think a little bit about it. Like anything else in business and unions, whatever it is, there's a grain of negativity, there's a grain of corruption, there's a grain of just about
like-
everything. So, but no one has like a lock on those things.
You're absolutely correct. And I've studied that an awful lot. And me being as deeply involved as I was on international levels with all the unions, I can tell you now that the amount of corruptions that exist within unions is certainly less than some of the corruptions I saw within some of the mega businesses I dealt with. Now, I'm not castigating anybody. All I'm saying is just that everybody's got a responsibility to do the right thing. And a union member that pays their dues on a daily basis has an absolute right to demand fair representation, as does a stockholder of a corporation. You've got a right to demand proper conduct by the people that lead your company. And I think that it's just, it all boils down to just doing the right thing. When I was a kid, my first real job that was out in the public was working for high voltage. I was a groundman with high voltage on the Pemberville substation on Pemberville Road off of Route 20.
Right.
And I fell 55 feet off of a highline pole and decided that wasn't my forte. So they hauled me around in the back of a trailer for weeks.
What
And
kind of injuries did you sustain?
I probably mental, but I didn't have anything
Landed on your head. Well,
broken.
that's good.
Right. I landed on my feet, but they stuck in the ground about 6 inches, and I passed out for the first time in my life. I was only knocked out 2 other times. Once in a bar fight in L.A. and once playing football without a helmet.
Okay.
So
We'll try and bypass those stories.
we'll bypass that. But every week I'd ask my foreman, Doug Wilkes, if I could take the test to be an operator, if he would put me into the apprenticeship training school with Albat back then to be an operating engineer. And he said they couldn't do that. They didn't have enough time. And I said, okay. So what I did, I went over there Saturday and Sunday for a year. And I would spend 4 hours each day. On Saturday and Sunday, I would lay out holes to dig in the ground. I would dig them with a backhoe, and then I would square them up. I would fill them back in, compact them, and put the grass back on top so it looked like, you know, you couldn't really tell anybody was really there.
Right.
And I would fill up the vehicles down to the Sinclair station and drive them back to the job site and put the key back under the seat. Well, I was there on a Sunday and I got arrested by a Pinkerton agent. He said, "We've been wondering who's stealing the equipment and using it to contract jobs." And I said, "Well, it's not me." And I tried to explain it to it, said, "We don't want to hear it." So they called the Wood County Police, they arrested me. And yeah, and then they called Sam Bass with the company, and they said that they were going to fire me. And I went on off of Dura Avenue back then to pick up my paycheck, and Sam came out and told me how disappointed he was. And I said, "Mr. Bass, I didn't do that." He said, "Well, what have you been doing with the equipment?" And I said, "Been training myself." And he said, "What do you mean training yourself?" I said, "Well, I asked my foreman if he could get me into the operating engineers and train me." And he said, "No." So I decided to train myself. And this is what I've been doing with the gasoline. The only thing I did was use the equipment, the bulldozer, the D5, the end loader, and the cherry picker to do this work. And I said, "I've trained myself to do that." He said, "Could you pass a test?" I said, "I think I could." I passed the test and I became their operator.
How old were you?
19. Yeah. And then my dad got me into the Millwrights Union. And after I took the test, I mean, Dad
Right.
just didn't wave a wand and I got in, but I had to pass the test and got into that. Went into a 4-year apprenticeship program and just enjoyed the living heck out of the work. Still do. And it went from there. It went from there. Just do the right thing. And never let people tell you you can't do it. Because if you pay attention to that, you won't do it. If you can't believe it, you sure can't achieve it.
You always have to remind yourself that the one true believer in you is you.
That's it.
You can doubt yourself anytime that you want to.
Everybody does on occasion.
Everybody does. Everybody wonders if, I'm just not smart enough to do what I'm doing, or I'm not smart enough to figure a way out of the dilemma I'm in.
That's right.
But you got to believe in yourself. Bottom line is, because no one else will, typically, but when you believe in yourself, it becomes pretty powerful. And I think you've always believed in yourself no matter what you tackled.
Mom and Dad taught me that. When we were going through those hard times, it would have been easy. It would have been easy for me and my brother to just, toss up our hands and say, "Woe is me." No thanks. We don't want that.
Well, I know your son got an element because I marvel at the places with Skylight where he is in Africa and Somalia, and I'm not even always sure of all my geography, but I can only say, and I know he's a family guy, being away from you and Diane and being away from his family. One of the things I know is that you've certainly passed it down to your son, because I marvel at the places that he is traveling to make Skylife a success. Yeah. Being away from you and his mom, Diane, and being away from his family and friends cannot be easy.
No, it's not. And look at the great family with Matt Jr. and Sophie. I'm blessed. And Jeannie. Oh my goodness. Bruce, I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I don't mean just in Toledo or the United States. I mean, I'm just absolutely lucky. All
right, so let me ask you about that.
Sure.
Do you make your own luck?
Yeah, a lot of times you do.
Okay.
Yes, you do. And the key to it is appreciating that. Every day when I wake up, you asked me a while ago, before we started the taping, we have good days and bad days. Yeah, but you know what? If you just simply say, I refuse to have a bad day. I surround myself with people that are positive. I will not surround myself with people that are negative. Negative will draw negative, and negative will drain you out. Positive will invigorate you. and have a positive attitude. I don't care how tough it gets. Never let it get you down.
Well, I think the other thing that you and I have shared over the years is that, and I don't want to pat either one of us on the back, but I believe it's true, is that we've always liked to help other people.
We do.
I mean, the folks that I had here from Mid-Story, and of course I brought one of my 5 children here, Nancy, and I brought in a couple other young folks just to meet with you. And the reason I did that was there's value for young folks to kind of hear people's story, to hear that maybe it wasn't all a bowl full of cherries.
Oh no.
I mean, you've had some pretty decent hits in your life. You haven't exactly been the picture of health your entire life.
No.
Starting with the fall from the 55-foot tower.
Yeah, it's not been easy. But you know, like I say, I'm just fortunate to look around. If you really want to feel sorry for yourself, stop it. All right, just go over to any hospital. I don't care where it's University of Michigan Cancer Center, MUO, Toledo, it doesn't matter. Just sit on the bench out in front of the place for an hour and watch the poor folks that come in with problems that are so much worse than yours. You will appreciate that you have a bad day.
Yeah. Ray, why are you doing this?
My grandchildren and children, I never got to know my grandparents.
Okay.
I never got to know either one of them. We were traveling around the country, and I really just didn't get to know them. Not the way I want to. Now, my grandchildren know me, and my grandson and granddaughter know that Papa can be a pain. I can, because I want them to be the best of the best of the best. And anytime they think that they're sad for themselves, stop it. Because just you can turn your life around. Your life is what you make it. And you can't be beaten if you don't believe you can.
Do you think there's less willingness to be honest with people? I mean, it kind of falls in that category of hurting your feelings. I don't think my dad worried about my feelings. I remember one day I said to him, he goes, "What's wrong?" I said, I'm kind of stressed out. He said, "Stressed?" He says, "You want to see stressed? I'll show you stress." And ever since then, I've kind of felt like, no, I probably don't know stress. But, you know, all of these little things that we're convinced that today's world somehow is different. It's more complicated, it's more complex. But technology has a way of changing regardless. We
have the American dream. We're so lucky. I mean, I've even got a dog, for God's sake. When we got a dog when I was a kid, take a dog to a vet. We didn't have money to take a dog to a vet. We didn't have money to take a cat to a vet. We were lucky to be able to get to the doctor ourselves. You know what I mean?
Right.
I live in a nice house. I've got great friends. I've got a great family, a beautiful wife who's just terrific and really understanding with a guy like me. And I don't have a thing to complain about.
So, Ray, there's a great chance that generations of Medlins are going to see this.
I hope so.
That's got to make you feel. I love the fact that you're doing this. You know, when you called me and you said, "Can you come over?" I said, "Sure." I mean, I'd have even changed anything, because I think it's something that we can do, but we don't take the time to do it. And so generations of Medlins are going to see this and say, you know, God, I got a similar situation. You know, technology is making my job go away.
Yeah.
You know, everyone, I think, in today's world is fearful of technology.
Yeah. I know. There are a lot of people that are afraid of everything today. And a lot of times what we have to do is embrace what scares us. And once you get that under your hat, you'll be just fine. And, you know, young people today especially, they really need to know what's going on, not just in the United States, not just in Toledo, not just in Ohio, but around the world, because things are changing around the world on a daily basis. And so many people don't plan for that at all. They don't anticipate that. And I just think that, you know, I want my grandchildren to know who their papa was.
Gotcha.
And their children to know. Because I didn't know mine. We traveled all around to these other plants and all these stuff, and you know, when you're busy making a living, it's difficult to be a social butterfly with your own relatives. You know what I mean?
But you've never talked of it as a hardship.
It never was.
I think a lot of people, when they hear it, would say, that sounds like a hardship to me, traveling around, different schools, different friends, but you still had the family unit.
It taught us to be versatile. We either made friends quickly or we didn't make friends at all. And
that's interesting.
I was always a larger kid for my size, for my age, and the older kids would tend to pick on me because I was physically large, but I wasn't the mental age that they were. You know, 2 or 3 years age makes a big difference with your mental capacity when you're connecting with other children. And so at some point, you have to decide, well, you know, am I going to sit and go, woe is me, woe is me? And the answer was no. I'm going to matriculate, I'm going to fit, and if I don't fit, then I'll see you.
Yeah. And part of that is you're a learner.
Yeah, I love to learn.
And that's why I felt comfortable bringing these 4 kids from the Ivy League schools. And not that that's the end all. They've got challenges. It doesn't matter where they went to school, what they graduated. I mean, one gal, Logan, graduated in comparative literature. A lot of people would say, well, there's a dead end for you. Well, not really.
No.
But you were quoting philosophers.
Yeah.
Some of them I actually knew, like Plato. In fact, I looked up after, well, you sent me the link.
Yeah.
And of course, we don't know anything I learned about Socrates because he didn't write anything down, and that was Plato's teacher.
He did not.
And I had forgotten, I knew he was the teacher, but I didn't know that we only have hand-me-downs, that Socrates did not write things.
That's right. He did not write it down, and Plato was one of his biggest critics, if you will. And deductive reasoning, inductive reasoning, all the different things that happened back then, thousands of years ago, that were still applicable today. Yeah. And I just find that really interesting. You know, it's a really, really cool world out there. Think of if they had electricity back then.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I've told my kids everything on the early Star Trek shows have come to fruition. Except for one thing that I told them in their lifetime will happen, and that's beam me aboard, Scotty. I absolutely believe that we now identify every cell in our body. We can label it with a supercomputer.
Oh, yeah.
We can disassemble and assemble, aka 3D printers are making organs, they're making, you know, different things. So I said in their lifetime, and they've said no, but I absolutely believe that when that happens, and if I'm not here, which I'd love to be here, that will be all of a sudden what happens to airlines, to car industry. All of a sudden now you beam, Matt goes to work in Somalia that day.
It's transformative
from his home
now.
And comes home at night.
Well, if you remember right, Jason and I were talking about this earlier before you came.
Okay.
One of my major heroes is Nikola Tesla. And you know, so many things were taken from Tesla, both by Thomas Edison and others, and not only his ideas were taken, but the credit for those ideas were taken.
His patents.
Those
Morgan Stanley, the original banker Morgan Stanley, who backed Edison,
exactly,
basically bamboozled Westinghouse, who was the backer of Nikola Tesla. And I do ask that question, Ray, and it's amazing that people don't know. I say, who invented electricity? The number one answer,
Edison.
Edison. Number 2, Ben Franklin.
Yeah,
remember the kite?
I know, the
That's
kite with
2.
the key.
So I talk about Elon Musk and why he's resurrecting Tesla's name to credit him with the all-electric vehicle. And I really like that he's doing that. He's basically helping to rewrite history so we understand who should take credit for what.
I have a suspicion, and you're probably going to tell my great-grandchildren to just certify me right now, but out of the all of the boxes of Nikola Tesla's experiments that were taken, there were 80, and out of those, 20 of them were never discovered. Our government took those. Alien affairs is what they called it back then. It wasn't called the FBI. And they gave it to an MIT president, not president, a MIT professor,
Okay.
to study that, who said that they were not relevant, said they just weren't going to happen. And so 60 of the boxes were sent over to Belgrade. 20 of the boxes were held in the United States, and they were held by a guy by the name of John Trump, and it's Donald Trump's uncle. And I think that Nikola Tesla may have bought, so his works have been sold to Elon Musk.
Okay.
I don't know that.
I don't know. Well, you know what? Maybe we'll find that out someday.
I would hope.
Let's talk about learning, because Ray, again, bringing these kids, and they are kids, to you, I knew that not only would you enjoy it, because that keeps your mind active, it keeps the learning process
sleep
going.
all night.
But I knew that they could. Yes, I know, because I think I got 3 emails from
You
and
did.
a
You
phone
got
call
them during the
shortly
middle of the
thereafter.
night, and then I called you the
Yeah.
next day.
I'm convinced as we live longer, and your grandkids are probably going to live to at least 110, be active 105.
I agree.
Retirement at 65 is no longer capable.
No.
Can't make enough money.
No.
But I think going back to school on a regular basis, we used to call them non-traditional students.
Yeah.
But as universities run out of students, because we're not duplicating our population
No.
like we were, is that going back on a regular basis to take specific courses, whether it's technology courses, whether it's, computer courses, whether, it's
Coding.
Socrates. Right, Socrates and Plato.
Yeah.
That kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Do you think that that is where maybe the educational system has to start thinking? Because I don't see them doing that.
We have to start thinking, in my opinion, Bruce, just in
Yes.
my opinion, we have to start thinking at preschool classes that are 4 years and under. Unless we break the chains of poverty, unless we start explaining to the young folks today, when their minds are so formative, that drugs isn't a good thing, and stealing isn't a good thing, and crime isn't a good thing. And we talk about changing mindsets. There's where you change the mindsets. We can't wait until they're 15 years old or 16 years old or even 10 years old. We got to start changing those mindsets now. And I've been to Europe many times. I've studied the German system of apprenticeship. I've studied the German system of education. And they look at education as an investment, not a cost. And until we take on that mindset, we're in trouble. We're definitely in trouble.
Yeah. Well, the one thing that continually makes us great is immigration.
Yes.
The smartest, I remember once my oldest son, who went to St. John's, came home, and gosh, I hope I'm not talking out of school, but he said, "Dad, why are the students from India so smart?" And I said, "I think it's because the smart ones leave and come here."
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
And I think to a certain degree, whether it's Croatians or whatever country you want to talk about, a lot of the smart people come here because of our system of democracy, which we don't appreciate.
No.
We don't participate. And it's really not the politicians. Every time I hear someone throw a politician under, I go, "Why don't you run?" "Oh,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have that job." All right,
Yeah.
so somebody has to do it, right?
Yeah.
And if it's not you and everyone else says the same thing, you
That's right.
kind of get what you ask for. But by the way, they're trying to do the best they can. I don't think they purposely go in and say, "I'm going in to be corrupt."
We were a grand experiment. When we came through the Revolutionary War, there was no other country like us. I mean, all the other ones were monarchies, they were oligarchies, they were all of the plutarchies, all of these things. And they looked for us to fail. They laughed at us. They laughed at our people that drafted a Constitution and Bill of Rights and all of these things. One vote, one man. Unless you were black, and then you're only 1/3, and that went to the slaveholder. But all of these things are things that we really have to consider, that the biggest danger that we have is from an epistocracy. Now, an epistocracy is not talked about very often.
No.
An epistocracy is where you pass a test to be able to vote.
Okay.
And if you don't pass your test at the proper level, you're only accorded a percentage of a vote. However, if you're wealthy and if you went to an Ivy League school, you maybe have 100 votes. Mm-hmm. They allocate your right to vote based on your education and income level. When we get to that point, we're in a real big trouble.
That's not good. Ray, let me ask you this. Your kids obviously didn't grow up like you.
No.
They grew up much better.
They did.
Financially and...
Yes.
Okay. And probably position-wise, not that your dad wasn't somebody to respect, but I'm just saying you've been chairman of the Port Authority. I think you've been chairman of Bowling Green State University.
Yeah.
I know you were chief of staff for Mayor Carty Finkbeiner. We'll be glad we got his name in on this tape.
Actually, economic development director for 39 days.
Okay. Head of a union all the way up to international. So the chances are your grandkids aren't going to grow up like you. So
oh my God, I hope they do better.
So how do you advise them? Maybe was your adversity what made you, or
Yes.
is it the principles your parents taught you that you can pass on?
The principles.
Okay.
It was the principle.
What are those principles?
The principle is do the right thing.
Okay.
I want my grandchildren, and I know you want your grandchildren
And
your
generations
children.
after.
Oh my goodness, ad infinitum.
Right.
On and on and on. I want them to understand, never give up.
Okay.
You don't have
What
to
other
give
principles, Ray?
up. Be fair, be honest, be courageous. Be prepared to stand in a room full of people and have them oppose you, even if you are pressured. That's okay. That's okay. If you know you're right in your heart,
Stick to your viewpoint.
and if you know that you're true to your principles, stay with it. Don't let somebody sway you, and don't make somebody make you corrupt. You do not have to be corrupt. And if you help people, it will always come back to you. Always. It never fails. It's karma. And when you do help somebody, especially somebody that's young, and if you help them get into a business and say, you know what, Jason, at some point I'm going to call you in the future, and I'm going to ask you to mentor somebody that's young coming up. All I want to do is ask you to help. Nothing else. I don't want any money. They don't want any money. They need some advice. They need mentoring.
Do they know that? Do they know they need?
You have to tell them. You have to tell. You know, some of my mentors in life, besides yourself, Ed Ryder, my dad.
Banker, one of the greatest bankers Toledo ever produced, probably.
He was one of my high school teachers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Before a
Ed,
banker.
Is that right?
Yes.
Ed Ryder. We have people like my dad. My dad was my closest friend and mentor. And you know, for people today to argue with their parents and, you know, yell at their parents and do I would never think of that. Are you kidding? Not only would Dad bust our ass, but we would be so ashamed we wouldn't know how to act. And my friends didn't either. We opened the doors for ladies. We treated people with respect. And the people today, it's a funny thing today. They want respect, but they don't want to give respect. And that doesn't happen. In order for you to get respect, you have to be able to first give respect. And I find that that's a real shortcoming today. We've forgotten how to do that. And communications, do it face to face. What's with all this?
Texting?
Yeah, texting and sexting and all of this porn stuff. And, you know, if you want to do that, that's your business. But you know what your life is going to be when you get ready to retire? You're going to be a lonely old guy with a bunch of Cheetos and a beer.
Yeah, and like everything, there's a time and a place for texting, but for instance, I always use this, had it been around when I was dating, it'd have been much easier just to say, do you want to go out tonight? And if she said no, but didn't capitalize it, which means yelling, if you capitalize it, right? Then I'd be okay with it. It wasn't like it was a put down, so it's a way of not taking a risk, taking a chance. And I think the risk thing is something that these generations have to begin to understand.
I agree.
You can't move ahead without taking risks.
You can't.
You're going to fail more times than you're going to win.
You are. What's wrong with failure if you learn from it? It's okay.
So when you failed, Ray, you didn't feel good, did you?
Well, no, nobody feels good about failure. But
so how'd you get through that?
You dust yourself off. You say, what am I? What am I? Am I some kind of a chump that just gets refused one time and then all of a sudden I blame it on everybody else? No. You move on. You help. And when you want to be the type of person, Ed Ryder told me this. I was chairman of the board at Bowling Green University, and Ed gave the speech for the graduating class. And he said, you want to be the person that when you walk into the room, people say, oh my God, here comes X. Here comes Bruce. Here comes Jason. Here comes Ray. I'm so glad to see them in the room. And when you leave, they say, I wish they could have stayed longer. And you know, too many people today, when you walk into the room and they're negative people and they don't want to bring anything but negativity, when you walk into the room, they say, oh man, I wish they hadn't have shown up.
Well, and Ed was a person who extended himself.
He did.
If you walked in and were a multi-millionaire, or you walked in and didn't have a pot to pee in, I don't believe Ed ever treated anyone different.
Never.
I think he thought that second one had the chance of being a multi-millionaire.
He did. And you know, the thing about the world is funny too, and I learned this from my mom and dad, that my dad and mom were problem solvers, not problem creators. And problem creators are easy to find. You just look around the corner and you've got people, well, you know, well, we ought to be doing this, we ought to be doing that. Well, you know, that's fine. But what about how to solve that problem? Do you have a solution for that? What about some ideas on that?
How about, how do you feel about leading by example?
Oh, you have to lead by example. And my mom and dad led me by example. And, you know, Dad was out of World War II. I've already told you he flew the hump in Indochina. Mom worked for the government and did this and did that. And we went through diversity. Dad was out of work for a long time. Never once did Mom and Dad back off on me and my brother of holding us to high standards. Not once. School was first. School was first.
Education.
Work was second. And if you did that and you put the money in the pot, we were able to stay in a trailer court. You know what? And we were able to get powdered milk and powdered eggs and Spam from Korean War and World War II in some cases at Camp Perry. That's okay. We made it.
Yeah.
And you know what? I will never not help somebody if I can. Ever.
Right. And it's not like you look for the payback. You just know that first of all, that's who you are and that's how you feel good. So your payback is almost immediate.
It is.
Right?
It is.
But then there's something usually down the road that you didn't count on.
It is.
By extending yourself.
It is.
So
yeah.
I just want to get back to education because I know I've shared with you my middle child of 5 was my worst student. And he's now gone back to school for aerospace and aeronautical engineering and is getting 100% on everything.
Where at, Bruce?
University of Toledo.
Ah.
And so, and he's a pilot, so, you know, and I was never not proud of him. School wasn't his thing, it seemed like.
Yeah.
But I also, he came into my office a couple months ago showing me his test results, and he said, Dad, don't you think that a high school or college counselor should have figured out that I'm good in math and then direct me in certain ways? Which they didn't do.
No.
And what I told him was this: most high school and college counselors have not had a job in 30 years.
No. No.
They don't know what's going on out there. They haven't been in the job market. And so they're basically telling people what they told them for the past 30 years.
We have training jobs out there today that are spending hundreds of millions of dollars on training that will not have a job at the end of it. Let's face it.
Right.
You know, I just saw a couple of weeks ago where there was a training operation and grants and this and that. That's fine. That's fine. But, you know, in order to train effectively, you have to have a job at the end of that training. If you don't have a job at the end of training, what have you done?
Yep. Job is everything, because a job leads to a career.
And self-esteem.
And self-esteem.
In order to have
Absolutely.
self-esteem, you have to, I don't care if a young person doesn't think that my idea of the American dream is the same as theirs. I don't care. Yeah.
Ray, what kind of advice, I mean, if you know, a generation down is going through some tough times, what would you tell them to do?
Save your money. Be able to balance what you have. Be able to really understand what it is to finance a car, finance a house. Be able to understand that when you get ready to retire, some of these programs that we have today under ultra-conservative leadership may not be here. And even though you paid for it, you're liable to lose it. So be able to plan for your retirement yourself. My wife and I did that. My wife raised heck with me when I was young, because I told her, I said, we need to plan for this now. And she said, well, I could use that money you're putting in your pension fund. I said, no, you will use that money I'm putting in a pension fund, but it'll be later on. And it's worked out just fine. Now, I worry about the younger people. Are they going to work till they die? I mean, what are we prepared to do here? And you said it earlier, that the life expectancy of people is probably going to go up.
Way up.
We are not planning for new job opportunities and the intervention of technology in jobs in the United States the way some countries are. Belgium and Europe and Switzerland. Switzerland just voted down this and voted down that. But we need to really plan for that, because without that, we're going to become a third world country pretty quick.
So if they've run into a bump in the road, part of that may be because they really hadn't thought out a plan ahead of time.
No.
Could be a financial issue, it could be a family issue, it could be
Social issue?
Social issue. It could be a job related. They did a great job and there was a layoff unrelated to them. The other thing is, though, when we talked about the think tank the other day, Ray,
yes,
which I think you're really onto something, you know, they're talking about universal income.
Yes.
Which basically means is that the money we make off of robotics,
yes,
will be given to us directly. And in a way, it probably does. When you think about Jeep in '57,
yes,
25,000 employees,
yeah,
the beautiful all-new facilities there add up to about 1,100 because there's so many robots in there. So in a way, we're already making money off of robots. Jack Ma just came out and said he's Alibaba. He's like one of the richest Chinese.
yeah.
Said we'll have 12-hour work weeks soon.
Well, you see, Jack Ma, he came out and he said this. He said the United States has nothing to bitch about because they claim that China and other countries are affecting them financially. He said if the United States hadn't so bent on war over the past 25 or 30 years and spent trillions of dollars on war, you could have increased your ability to earn and produce too.
Interesting.
You know, and I think it's a very interesting statement that a fellow like Jack Ma can make, and this man he's nobody's chump.
No, that's for sure.
And when we spent trillions of dollars, now I'd like for someone, anybody, I don't care, anybody, to tell me how much better we are today than what we were when we started the wars in the Middle East.
The final question I have is, where do you see yourself and Diane a year from now, 5 years from now? What do you see yourself doing?
Easy. Number one, I'd like to re-engage. I'd like to get back in business involvement, and not for the money, but for the self-satisfaction and for the self-esteem.
Okay.
I lost a lot of self-esteem as I was out of business for 10 years and was just on the verge of death.
Right.
Okay, it's a real.
You couldn't walk for 4 or 5 years?
I was in a wheelchair for over 5 years, and I was in pain 7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
Did you ever want to cash in?
Yes. Sure.
See, that's what I like about you, Ray. If anything that all these generations is going to learn about Grandpa Medlin or Great-Grandpa Medlin, honesty. When asked a question, it was honest.
Yeah.
That's what it was. It's okay to contemplate.
It is.
But obviously, your contemplation said, I'm not ready yet.
That's what I said. I gave it the last shot with Dr. Benjamin Salpietro, and he saved my life. And I'm able to walk in my house without a cane. I'm able to go to a restaurant without a cane. I have 2 bad knees, 2 bad shoulders, and I would have been dead now without Benjamin Salpietro a year ago. And yes, the pain.
And your prognosis by most of the other docs you went to was not good.
I was gone.
Yeah.
They gave up on me.
So you kept pursuing.
I refused to give up.
Refused to give up.
I want my grandchildren to never give up.